Now live.
Okay, welcome everybody to the combined ed policy and ops meeting, which makes for a nice short month for everybody. So I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional territories. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. So welcome everybody. Could I get a motion to approve the combined operations policy and planning and education policy agenda? Thank you, Nicole, seconded by Anne. Do we have any additions or deletions? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve? And
Sure, I vote in favor.
Okay, all those in favor? And the motion's approved. So I think we go down to the education policy direction meeting and the approval of the minutes. Could I have a mover to approve the minutes? Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Nicole. Do we have any questions or additions to the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. So I don't see any business arising unless somebody has something they wish to pursue.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, just a point of privilege. I am here tonight. I am appearing not with my video on. I have a medical issue that I'm dealing with, but just wanted to let folks know that I am here. I will be participating in the voting and in the discussion to the best capacity possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Painter. So I think we can go straight to presentations of the committee. So I'll turn it over to the learning team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andy, are you sharing slides this evening?
I do not think I've had the slides yet. If you want to go forward, or you can share your screen.
Okay,
I'd be happy to run through the slides with you.
Sorry, you can't get them, Andy?
I don't think I've had them yet. Let me check my mail. 1 second. If not, if someone wants to send them over, and I can share the screen. You can go ahead and share yourself, David.
All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah, we're good? Okay, great, thank you. So good evening. This evening, District Vice Principal Charmaine Short and I are going to be speaking to some components of the K-5 literacy framework. And we've also invited some of our administrative colleagues to join us this evening and share how the framework is making a difference in their schools. So as you may remember in our fall presentation that we had with you, we spoke about the overarching goals of the K-5 literacy framework, and that is to improve literacy outcomes for all learners, to address the inequity of outcomes for Indigenous learners, children and youth in care, and students with diverse learning needs and literacy, to increase collective efficacy through embedded school team collaboration, and to broaden knowledge of evidence-based instructional strategies. So this evening, we're going to talk about four key components of the literacy framework, and that is around early literacy collaboration teachers, literacy collaboration teams, new career teacher professional learning, and early years literacy through play and oral language. So when we're looking at the framework, there's 4 documents that really guide the work that we do. One is the First People's Principles of Learning. The other is the early learning framework. And the third is the how we are doing report, the Child and Youth in Care government report. So when we're thinking about building capacity, capacity involves learning at all levels of our system. To continue to close the gap for all learners, shifts in thinking and doing continue to be necessary throughout our learning community. We recognize incredible work and commitment from our teachers, our school-based administrators, EAs, and other members of the school staff in all areas of learning, including literacy. And therefore, we draw from the expertise in our schools and build on the existing capacity to improve the equity of opportunity for all learners. The framework across all components and layers invites time for collaborative conversations and next step choices to be made. The framework encourages more people-to-people connections. That includes the students within classrooms, teachers with students, teachers with teachers, and so on. The funding for this framework is targeted to provide time and invite collaboration. When we know better, we do better, and we have so much to gain from each other. So the offering in this framework brings educators together to connect and grow from each other's strengths. As we think about components of the K-5 literacy framework, tonight we'll first hear from Principal Connor McCoy from Quadra Elementary School. Quadra is one of 8 schools that currently supported by our 4 early literacy collaboration teachers. This year, our ELCTs, as we call them, are working full-time in 8 of our 28 elementary schools. And those schools include South Park, James Bay, Oaklands, George J, Cloverdale, Vic West, Macaulay, and lastly, Quadra. Next year, our hope is to add 1 more ELCT to our district, which would support 2 additional schools. District team continues to meet weekly with our early literacy collaboration teachers to provide ongoing opportunities for collaboration, connection, and supports. Connor will be sharing how the role of the ECLT has benefited students and staff at Quadra Elementary, and we're gonna invite him now to speak.
David, thank you very much. And I thank everybody in the virtual room tonight for allowing us a chance to share. So I'm going to refer to our early learning collaborative teacher as Sarah because that's her name. So Sarah has been embraced by our school community, and that's happened over time as she spent a lot of time building relationships with both staff and students, as well as acquiring knowledge as to what teachers and students need. She's been helping staff acquire data on student literacy progress, discussing which assessments and screening tools to use, which skills to assess, and then supporting them using that data to plan for to meet students where they're at. She has particularly enjoyed collaborating with staff about structured literacy and the research that supports this way of teaching literacy. She's participated in everything that we've had at the school and in our school meetings, even when it's not her day, because we share her with Cloverdale School. She has just been excellent in her role and helping staff plan to direct instruction stemming from research-based literature. She's consulted by staff about the how and the why of particular strategies, activities, and assessments. She's shared numerous resources to help staff who are looking to augment the ways in which they've been teaching. And by sharing this information and having conversations, this has promoted that collaborative kind of thing that we're looking for. I'm going to get into a couple of just things that she's doing because she doesn't do the same thing in every class. It depends on what the teacher and the students need. And I emphasize more what the student need is. So she works with teachers to assess the needs, and they co-create what the program is in most cases. She's in a grade 2-3 class that has a fair number of reluctant writers. And this particular term, the collaborative efforts of the co-teaching between Sarah and the classroom teacher has brought them from struggling to generate ideas to being able to express their ideas in writing, as well as increasing that writing output. Her role has allowed her to model lessons, co-teach, and support the classroom teacher, all in a collaborative type of a model. The students have benefited from having two teachers working collaboratively, and they keep their writing activities consistent, even on days when she was not working at this school. So this has, what she's implemented in the classroom is able to take life of its own without her being there. In a grade 1-2 class, she introduced some elements of structured literacy, and that's phonological awareness and phonics activities to the students who have been learning from a more balanced literacy approach. These students have made good progress in their foundational skills in learning to read and write. And what's also important to note is that they're showing confidence in their skills and feeling proud of their learning. In another grade 1-2 class, the teacher had set up word work groups based on a spelling program. After learning about the importance of phonological awareness and phonics for early readers and writers, the teachers of that class, because there are two, invited her to participate as a small group leader during word work center rotations. They shared with her that they're grateful for having her in their class because they didn't know much about these elements, and they're seeing a positive difference in students' ability to read and write after spending some time working with Sarah. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight about that last one is that teachers are receptive to what Sarah is, it's what she's packaging for them. So in some cases, it's just that a teacher may have not been introduced to a certain way of enhancing literacy, and her way of working with our teachers and our students is non-intrusive to the point that teachers don't find her at all threatening, and very collaborative. I find her work in the school has been solid overall, and I think that the overall impact for staff and students is I can't even begin to measure. And as soon as, well, we will be able to measure as soon as we start seeing this year-over-year data in our benchmark app. Something else that she's been instrumental in helping teachers enter their data into the app. So that's about it in a nutshell. And again, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present this bit of information for you.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate that. And just a note, Sarah is as one of our 4 ELCTs. She works part-time at Quadra, and then the other part of her job is at Cloverdale. So we have, again, those teachers working between 2 schools. And Sarah is one of our 4 fabulous early literacy collaboration teachers. We're now going to hear from Principal Ingrid Fawcett and Vice Principal Jen Cox from Frank Hobbs Elementary School. Frank Hobbs is one of 20 elementary schools who is participating in the Literacy Collaboration Series facilitated by district team and literacy and learning expert Faye Brownlee. Each school participating in this series also received $4,000 in targeted funding to support literacy instruction and work that they are targeting in their schools. Ingrid and Jen will be sharing how these supports have benefited Frank Hobbs. So welcome, Ingrid and Jen.
Thank you. And again, thank you everyone for having us here tonight and be able to share with you on how at Frank Hobbs we're working together in the collaborative teams to support our students to be successful in their literacy endeavors. So we chose to start off with this spiral of inquiry slide because all of our work is very central to this. We do have a really collaborative culture at Frank Hobbs, and this slide reminds us that we go through this spiral as we work together, and we ask some pretty key questions, which are found in the middle of this slide, which is what is going on for our students? How do we know? And why does that matter? So the spiral of inquiry, or some of you may know it in an older term, action research, is where we get together, we have wonders, we have questions, we may have data, we dig into it, And from there, we start to implement plans and cycle back and reflect. So I just wanted to highlight that as a key piece to the work that we do at our school. David, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So before we get into the actual literacy collaboration teams, I do want you to know that in 2018, the staff at Frank Hobbs went through quite a process to develop a school-based strategic plan that ended up with 5 bold steps. And they were to foster learning opportunities for students, commit to assessment for learning, schedule time for collaboration, embed competencies and big ideas, and also to facilitate social emotional learning practices. So with those bold steps and that strategic plan in mind, we also developed 5 key structures and strategies that you'll see just off of that. So we took a look at our schedule, we took a look at our school-based team model, we took a look at the strategy of collaboration, professional development, alignment, and then accessing support from our district learning team. So one of the things we put in place following that strategic plan was to give devoted, committed time to literacy and numeracy during our mornings so that we would not have any preps interrupting our instructional time in the morning. We have been working and are continuing to work with a school-based team model in which our entire school-based team comes together and collaborates as a team, and then is we are each in classrooms. We're sort of assigned to particular classrooms to offer in-class support. And that leads us into collaboration, where we have a huge commitment to collaborate as a staff. And part of that is the school-based team, the individual support person in the classroom, also collaborates with the classroom teacher 3 times a year. So we do some little mini co-planning for each term. All of our professional development is aligned to our bold steps. And then as needed, we access support from our district learning team. And we're always delighted when we're able to have someone from the district learning team support us. So all of those things together, when we were offered the opportunity to join in with the literacy collaboration with Faye Brownlee, we felt we were really primed to take that and to run with it. So within that, we've been able to work with, we gathered 2 grade 2-3 teachers and 2 support teachers, myself included. So there were 4 of us that worked together, and that included our school-based team, our classroom teachers, the concept around that spiral of inquiry, our district learning team. And then we also brought in the work we've been doing with our continuums and performance standards. So we would be able to see how our students are performing throughout this. I think we'll move to the next slide, if that's all right, David. So, oh, sorry, this one is just so you can see, we popped this in so you could see what our bold steps were. And you can see that that was May 2021 is when we were hoping to get to them, and we are feeling pretty good about it. And we've just sort of rolled them over, and we're going to be doing some more goal setting this next month. But we'll move into the actual collaboration teams and the work we're doing there. Next slide. Thank you. So in our literacy collaboration teams, we pulled together to develop, to participate in the Faye Brownlee sessions. She is one of our literacy specialists in our province. You could call her one of our literacy gurus. She's fantastic and wonderful, and she presents to all of the literacy collaboration teams in our district, and then we meet separately to work on the work that she's presented. So in our work, we decided to pull together and design lessons together, and those lessons usually follow a 4-part learning model where we're accessing prior knowledge, we're processing new information, we're transforming information with students, and then we're reflecting to see what next steps or what goals students will do. So one of the things what I'm going to do is take you through one of the lessons that we have worked on, and we've done many in class with the teachers through this collaboration team. One of them is focused on something called a story studio workshop that our teacher librarian and with some of the work with Faye Brownlee has brought into our school. And it incorporates students designing like a 3D representation of their thinking. And there's something called loose parts, and you'll see in the slide that we have all kinds of little items. And the concept is that students build a 3D model, and then through that, they talk through it and talk about it. So I'm gonna just wanted you to see that that was one of the things that we focused on. So the next slide, David, please. Thank you. So this you can see we offer a lot. We planned together and created a lot of scaffolding to ensure that our students would be able to meet the reading writing connection. We know that it's really important for students to read so they can write, and we know it's important for them to write so they can improve their reading. So with this, we had a piece of reading that was read out loud to students, and we were asking them to develop a written response. And with the two classroom teachers, the learning support teacher, the teacher librarian, myself, and we also brought in for this particular lesson, one of our district team, Vicki Roberts, to support us in creating this lesson sequence. We came together as a group, we went into the classrooms, and our students worked with a lot of the scaffolding there. They talked with Partner Talk, they used coaching cards, we had them generate their own vocabularies, we had them use lots of imagery. We were setting them up for a successful piece of writing. And then the students did their first draft. The teachers met afterwards. We did reflection in our collaborative team, and we realized through that process, the spiral of inquiry, that we still needed to have more scaffolding. We hadn't set them up with enough supports. So what we did is we put in place what we called the story studio. That's when we decided, whoops, let's stop here. Let's give kids another opportunity. So the next day, the teacher librarian took the students, they used the story studio, they brought them together, and I can show you them in the next slide what it looks like. Thank you, David. So the kids are working with their loose parts. You can see they're building what the story or what it is they want to write about. You'll also notice that there's some coaching cards that they have, and they use those coaching cards to go through AB Partner Talk and to coach each other to come up with ideas. So now not only do they have the coaching cards and the talk, but they have something that they've actually manipulated and created that they can talk about that's going to support their writing. So in the library that day, not only did we have the students doing the AB Partner Talk with the coaching cards when the students were talking about their story studios, but if you go to the next slide, David, this one represents, in addition, where we had a teacher doing a conference with the students. So we have one little grade 2 boy here. And on that first day, though he participated fully and was very verbal about his responses during the first lesson, he was really frustrated about the writing piece and really he did not produce any writing. So once he did the story studio and was coached by the teacher, you'll notice up in the upper right corner, I guess it is, that he was able to produce a piece of writing. And you'll notice where the teacher has highlighted on the performance standards that child is fully meeting, or in our language that we're using now, that he is proficient in his writing at grade level. I don't know, I might ask you, David, to see if we can hear little Seb talking. You might not be able to hear him clearly. The teacher is asking him to talk about the feelings of the character in the story, and then goes on to ask him about his connections. But I think we'll just listen for a couple, maybe half a minute, and it might be difficult, and we'll just stop.
I'll give it a try. I don't know if we're going to get volume, but we'll see if we can.
Okay. I don't hear volume. So he's describing his story studio to the teacher as she's asking questions. And in this case, we were doing a focus on a book around kindness. So he was telling her about the boy in the story. And then she does ask him, well, what about your connections? And he says, my connections? And she says, yeah, how your own experience about kindness. And he talks about how he was excluded from a game once during play. And then they start to talk about the writing that he's going to be producing. And after that, that's when he was able to do that right and come out with a proficient on the performance exam. So we're not going to be able to hear him, but I just thought it's nice to see little faces. So the next few slides are from our teachers, and what they are saying. Hopefully you can read these, but if not, and I might just do a little bit of it here. So this is Julie Chant. She's one of our grade 1-2 teachers, and she's just saying that the students were able to write at a higher level. There was an abundance of detail after the collaborative sessions, that they were able to get together within our school, and that the students benefited greatly from these, using the coaching cards, the story studio, and supported student learning that's going to be used over the year and incorporated into her ongoing practice. Thank you. And then we'll just go to the next. Another one of our teachers is Mr. Jason Wallasak, and he talks again about collaborating with the teacher librarian and how it provided those invaluable terms of helping his students create using visuals, and how important those visuals were, and the hands-on materials. And that using the performance scale, he can accurately measure and document the writing over the year. So that's been a really nice piece for him. We also had a student teacher who I didn't mention. Clarissa is in the grade 2-3 class, and she was talking about the importance of the student conferencing. So that's something that at our school, though it's not something that's particularly new, it's not something that a lot of the teachers had been previously using in our building. So the students were able to get feedback from the teacher. And what they did is, I didn't show you this part, they would have their writing, they'd be reading their writing to the teacher, and the teacher would be giving them feedback, asking them questions, and then they would set a goal for what they were going to do next. So that was a really good piece for the student teacher to be able to observe. And we have 2 more. We did not have our learning support teacher, was not able to contribute her thoughts on this. We had to get our slides in, and she was not working that day. But for myself, it's just that literacy collaboration time allows me as a principal so that I can be side by side with the teachers and the students in quite a rich professional development model that does follow that spiral of inquiry, and it aligns with both our school and our district strategic plan. And that by participating together with the teachers, with the Faye Brownlee, we can co-plan as a team, we can co-teach, and it's in that intimacy and immediacy of the authentic part in the classroom that helps bring this collaboration into fruition and gives it quite a bit of power. And it's making a difference for our students and for our teachers, so that we can move again and then even plan for next year. And then finally, our teacher librarian, who is one of our big key players and has helped to put the slides together, is that she talks about having the time and the opportunity to collaborate with the teachers and the inclusive learning team and the administrators that allowed us to build practices to support all of our students in engaging in this purposeful and authentic literacy. So that's sort of our story there. We've appreciated the opportunity to share with you tonight, and we appreciate the ongoing support that we get with collaboration, because when we can have that collaboration and align it with our school goals and have a mentor person such as Faye Brownlee support us, it's just adding to the success for our teachers and for our students. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Is you getting feedback? Hang on. All right, is that better? Great. Not sure what that was. Yeah, thank you so much, Ingrid. And beautiful. What a model for our district and a wonderful story. So thank you. I feel like we have some parallel stories to share tonight. I'm going to speak about the Early Career Teacher Literacy Series. And what a good fortune I have to work with these early career teachers. When many new teachers start their career, they come equipped with so much theory and knowledge about learning, and in this case, literacy learning, just wholeheartedly believing in each child's unique pathway and wishing all the best. And David, if you just don't mind moving to the next slide, thank you. And as they get to know their students, sort of the complexity of finding a pathway to success for each of their learners feels a little bit more like the picture here. And so in this series, we really wanted to offer the space, the time for collaboration for each participant to really reflect on what they know about their classroom and their students and begin to apply their knowledge and make it actionable and just sort of untangle that with them and sort that through. So really an opportunity to think about each student, their strengths, their needs, and then begin to connect strategies and interventions to best support the student growth in their classrooms. So we really just wanted to dive in to how to differentiate classroom literacy using the question, how can I connect what I know about each learner to how I teach them? And we've been just working through that. While this series continues in the spring after spring break, reflections from the participants have really been meaningful, and I wanted to speak about a couple of the takeaways so far. Many stories have come in about basically student motivation, engagement, and growth in writing. And the question that came about as we really talked about our learners was, what can I do to get them more motivated, engaged in their writing? And we decided to unpack that as a group and collaborated through that. When we provide more opportunities for our students to talk with one another, as Ingrid so eloquently described, really that becomes our drafting for our writing, and it really picks up on our oral language. So sharing our thinking and collaborating together before we write, we begin to see more developed writing, more elaborated vocabulary, deeper thinking, creative ideas, and really most importantly, I think, student voice. So really unpacking that, our French language coordinator, Madeline, she joined us for a session to extend that exploration of oral language as an entry point in the French immersion classrooms. So the Early Career Literacy Series is an example of how we can grow student literacy achievement by really prioritizing collaboration and a common theme, and just that collaborative dialogue, listening to these participants just talk through, talk about their students and wish for all the best for their students, and then diving into those strategies. It's just such an exciting opportunity, and when you see the wheels turning and the learning and the growth. And also I think that professional reflection and just having a network of colleagues to support each other and ultimately the students. So a few participants have shared stories and pictures about some of the engagement that they've noticed in their classrooms. And as they were finding success, a few of their colleagues, that sparked the interest of a few of their colleagues. And so the early literacy participants were able to lead professional learning and sharing in their buildings and extend their learning. So when we talk about collaboration, there's a rich example of how it can extend through our district. Really exciting. Thanks, David. If you don't mind moving to the next slide. Thank you so much. And I'm going to carry on a little bit more with what Frank Hobbs is doing, and thanks to Ingrid. One of the strategies in our Literacy Foundation through play was congruent with what we were working on in our early career teacher series, and just picking up that oral language piece. In the early literacy through play offering, we wanted to make sure that the participants could take away a structure that they could work in a sequence in their lessons that they could work through with their classrooms the next day and moving forward, and then continue to augment and enrich it. So this is such a beautiful structure, because when we talk about children feeling seen and heard, and when we talk about children just feeling the strength of their uniqueness and feeling valued, I'd like to share with you what this can look like in practice and really in action. And it connects to literacy learning and personal growth beautifully. So basically, as you know, stories help us share our own individual identity and also our sense of an understanding of our surroundings and our place. So when we have opportunities to share our stories and our thinking with each other, that's when we begin to feel heard. And we begin to recognize that our contributions matter. And therefore, we belong in the classroom family. And so when we begin to recognize that identity, we see ourselves as learners, and then we see ourselves as readers, and we see ourselves as authors. And that's the foundation of all learning. So to create an environment that's truly inclusive, our actions as educators, must really reflect that belief that everyone has the right to be included, and socially, emotionally, intellectually, and play, and ultimately story making is really an entry point, an accessible entry point for all students. So pictured here, we have a common sequence that we use for story making, and Ingrid referred to it as Story Studio. And so story making is a classroom, a literacy structure to support oral language and ultimately connection and belonging. And teachers use small materials called loose parts, pictured here again. And we use the sequence inspire, create, share, and extend. And so in the inspire pictures here, really, it's where the purposeful storytelling begins. It might start with a teacher sharing a story or reading a story or asking a big question, an inquiry question. And then after some rich discussion, maybe some interactive writing or brainstorming, students go off with their loose parts. And we call these provocations because the teacher has not just randomly thrown out bits and pieces. There's thoughtful pieces there that can really inspire the literacy foundations. So the provocations are there, and the students start to create or retell the story that they heard, or dive into the inquiry question that was asked. And then this is where that entry point is, because all of a sudden they have their voice, and they're able to share their voice through their actions and their play. And then the share part of the sequence is when the richness really just abounds. You see the children starting to take turns, and that shared attention. This is where we really start to see reciprocal interactions and students learning from one another, and that student collaboration. So they're sharing their stories with their voice, and then little friends are asking questions about their stories. And this is where the rich vocabulary starts to be elaborated, because they come up with words to describe what it is that they've created. So And extending that is then when you bridge that into writing. We know that when a child feels heard and understood, then that's their motivation for learning. So this learning through play model is really just essential for children to begin to see themselves as storytellers and as learners. I think Ingrid did such a beautiful job of elaborating, so I don't want to go into too much more detail, but I just love this little picture of the students sharing in the top right there. And I think it just comes down to when we invite that play and we invite that conversation, that's when we're inviting oral language, which is the bedrock to our literacy learning. So those are two other pieces of our framework that we've been offering this year. And we've really been so excited to see how even through the pandemic situations, we've been able to see these rich stories coming out of children literacy growth. And I just also want to thank Ingrid, Jen, Connor for being here. And David, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. So just in conclusion, in re-examining our K-5 literacy budget, we would continue to support targeted areas of the framework that we spoke to you about this evening for the 22-23 school year. So again, that total cost that we brought forward through the budget committee process is $576,000. Last year, or this year rather, that total cost was $613,000. So that is a potential savings of $37,000. So again, thanks so much for having us here tonight, and wondering if there's any questions from the trustees.
You're on mute.
I really enjoyed hearing about how literacy is starting with perhaps a story or an activity or play or whatever it takes to inspire people to think about the things they do and love. So that was very exciting. Yes, do we have any questions? Yes, Jordan.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, it is really exciting as a mom of 3 little kids who've all are at various stages of struggling with early literacy. This is super inspiring. And I think about, just that focus on like storytelling and that sense of them as storytellers, and how we are all of my little guys are great oral storytellers, and there's so much focus on the written. And so this was just really inspiring for me personally about how to sort of bridge that strength that they have and help them write a story about themselves as storytellers, and how that can really bridge into some of those more challenging pieces, like figuring out how to spell the word though at different levels. I mean, it's just it's challenging. My kids are in kindy 3 and 5. So I'm really I am there. I am here in this with you. And my school is not one of the schools that has this. We have reading recovery, which has served one of my kids quite well. But I'm really excited about this. We were interrupted because of COVID. And so, it's just reading recovery is quite a short window. And so I love that this is really grabbing them across those primary years. And I do wonder what our plans are for going across more schools. We're only adding 2 on. Is that sort of the plan for next year? And then if do we have a vision for where are we going? Will my school continue to have reading recovery in the meantime? How are we balancing this shift sort of across the district? And all things being equal, could we get to a place where we had enough of these early literacy teachers to support all of our elementary schools? And if so, when? Sorry, lots of questions bundled in, but you know where I'm going. What's the vision?
Thanks, Trustee Waters. Just a couple clarification pieces. Connor spoke to the early literacy collaboration teachers. So those are the folks that are in 10 of our schools, or 8 of our schools currently. Ingrid and Jen's stories from Frank Hobbs, and also the ones that Charmaine shared today, are for any school. So we've got those 20 schools that are part of those collaboration series. So those aren't necessarily schools that have an early literacy collaboration teacher. They might be other schools that have taken part in that. So that's open to anybody who wanted to be part of those. And then the work that Charmaine does through the early years and through the new career teacher pieces, those again are open to teachers that are interested in any of our schools. And so just so those pieces are there. In terms of reading recovery, moving forward, what I've understood in connecting with school-based administrators is we have 3 schools that want to continue with reading recovery for next year. And that's been through consultation with their school-based teams and their staff. So that's what I've heard from those staff is right now, currently the thinking is 3 schools want to continue. And I think 3 are planning a different approach for next year. One would like to have an early literacy collaboration teacher. And I think in conversations with Craig Flower, I think they would like some additional learning supports as kind of their plan to support literacy in their building. So again, our job as district team is to continue to be responsive to the needs of schools, communities with their teachers and administrative partners and supporting the students in their buildings.
Can I just ask a follow-up question, Tom?
Yes.
Thank you so much for the clarification. There is a lot going on in early literacy. So I guess my question is how are we promoting all of this good work across all of this? And I know there's excellent work happening in all of our schools, without a doubt, but making sure that we're sharing the successes and, inspiring, others to sort of engage in some of this work and making sure that we do have the support and the collaboration time, like in terms of the sort of the funding picture and the ask, is that getting us where we need to go? Like if all the schools came on and we're like, we really want to get on board with some of this, after seeing your excellent presentation tonight, are we going to be able to actually support that?
It's a big question, Trustee Waters. I think the piece.
You don't have to have the answer. I mean, I'm just curious.
I think, again, the work is around, as we talked about, that really importance around collaboration and connection, right? So I think having many opportunities in many different paths, I think, for our teachers and our educators to connect and through different processes like the collaboration series, having collaboration funds that have been built into schools to support literacy, being part of the early literacy collaboration teams. I see our teachers, those teachers come together weekly and they dialogue and they learn from each other. So I think just providing different opportunities for folks to be able to come together and to share ideas and their thinking and learn. So I think, again, building some of those processes throughout our system are important moving forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's big, and it's because it is big and complex. And I'm just really grateful for this fulsome presentation, and I look forward to hearing more as we start to see the other end too around some results or this, you guys are really doing the work that is the foundation that everything else that is to come in the district. So my hands up to all of you for making sure we're delivering the best possible early literacy experience as we can. No pressure.
Okay, so David, are you going on to do more district team updates? Or are we moving along?
Was I speaking to the memo that was part of the package, Trustee Ferris?
Not really sure. I'll go to Deb Whitten for that.
The memo, yes, Principal Hovis provided. Some of the questions had come forward through previous meetings, and so he put that memo together to clarify any outstanding questions and can likely answer a few if you have them.
Sure. So do we have any questions for David on that? Yes, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for circling back on those outstanding questions. It's much appreciated. I just wondered if you'd heard back in particular from middle and high schools on the extent to which the Fortis learning resources are being used elsewhere beyond the 3 elementary schools?
I believe when I reached out, Trustee Duncan, I reached out to elementary and middle, and I asked administrators to connect back with me if there were any folks that were using, any educators that were using the Fortis BC curriculum. And so my responses back were from 3 schools, and I put that in the memo. And I think, to my understanding, what I'm hearing is that it's very few. I think there was 4 teachers that were identified from schools that were using components of it in different ways. And some of it was just taking some bits and pieces of the content. Others felt that the Fortis, the actual idea of Fortis or what Fortis does wasn't discussed, but they liked units around the water cycle and thermal energy because some of these were in French. So some of them used it that way. Others, again, just took different portions of it or some elements of the curriculum that they used. But again, what I heard back from school was that approximately 4 teachers were using the curriculum.
Nicole, again?
Yeah, just a follow-up. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hovis, for that clarification. Are we planning on reaching out to high schools as well to ask whether or not they are using those materials? Or did I misunderstand you? You did. My understanding from your answer was that it was elementary and middle,
Yes.
but that, yeah. So are we planning to reach out to high schools? My understanding is that the curriculum materials or the learning materials that Fortis has created are K to 12, and so that there are components that could be utilized potentially in our high schools.
I think we can definitely go back. I'll go back and take a look at the curriculum, Trustee Duncan, and make sure it does connect back to high school, and I can reach out to those high schools and get more information as well.
That would be great, yeah, because I think this is going to come up again for us. I know that it's certainly starting to, the awareness is being raised across the province, I think, when it comes to this kind of corporate sponsored learning resources. And so, you know, at some point, I think when we have a better understanding of how we're utilizing those materials, it would be great to see an item on the agenda come back so we can sort of have a more broad-based and general discussion about learning resources. One of the concerns certainly that I've heard is that the resources are, it's not that folks really particularly want to use these resources, but that they're just so easy to access. And in the absence of easily accessible science-based learning resources, that it's just easy to use them. And so I'm wondering, you know, maybe at a later date, I expect not tonight, but maybe at a later date, we could have a more general discussion about how we can fill those gaps and support educators to more easily access appropriate science-based learning resources, so they're not inclined to use things like the Fortis materials.
Thank you for your question, Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I just felt, I will bring it up at the board meeting in my report, but at Vista on the weekend, so the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association, this was also a topic of discussion, was the Fortis materials, and it does go K to 12, and a lot of the examples that were presented were quite alarming as to what is the content. But regardless, motion was passed to write to the Ministry of Education in regards to sponsorship in our curriculum and specifically reviewing the Fortis material. So maybe just a heads up as well that it was my intent to bring up in trustee questions if we have policy within our district around sponsorship, and because I guess this does actually fall into sponsorship was what the discussion was. It's not, it is free curriculum that is sponsored by an org. You know, to make an example, we don't have Coke teaching, providing information on home economics and cooking, right? Like we make sure that it's an unbiased, science-based piece of curriculum. And I think Trustee Duncan makes some excellent points that it's easy to access, and teachers are under pressure and strain to get that stuff out there. And you know, if nobody's vetting it, how would you know? What would you know? So maybe just a heads up that I think we should have a discussion is what type of materials through sponsorship, if we can create a policy in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. Seeing no further questions, I think we'll move along. There's no new business or notices of motion, so I think I might just turn over to Elaine Leonard for operations.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening and welcome to the operations portion of our joint committee meeting. Could I have approval of the minutes for February the 14th? Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, Jordan. Any discussion on the minutes? Any errors or omissions or changes? Trustee Nicole Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a minor amendment at each one of the minutes, just to add my name and after Trustee Whitaker's, to indicate that the questions and answers that were to be provided and posted also included my questions as well. So it would be just adding Trustee Duncan following Trustee Whitaker's name at H1.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions about the minutes? Okay, seeing none, could I have approval of the minutes? All those in favor? And that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Any business arising from the minutes? Trustee Whitaker?
Thank you. I just wanted to have it noted in these minutes that under I in notice of motion, 2 of the 3 motions that I did put forward were deemed in camera items by the chair, and as such, I did withdraw those motions until such time as we can properly be discussed in public. So just so the public knows that those motions have disappeared.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other business arising? Okay, seeing none, I have no presentations to the committee at this time. Superintendent's report, enrollment update, Interim Deputy Superintendent Roberts, please.
Good evening. As you can see within the pages 38 and 39 of your pack-up, there's some updates on enrollment for the coming school year. Again, as you can see, we've chosen to focus on kindergarten enrollment at this time. You have the numbers there by individual school, as well as the totals for the district for 2022-23. As mentioned in the memo, I'd like to add or reiterate that the total number that you can see for the district of fractionally over 1,300 is expected to rise by the time September moves around. At this time last year, we had somewhere between 60 to 70 kindergarten students register with the district. The numbers in the final column are just added so that you have a sense of how a school may increase or decrease in size by comparing those elementary kindergarten numbers to the grade 5. And you may also be interested to compare the numbers for 2021 and 2022, because I think this perhaps will enable readers to get a sense of what we could expect future cohorts to be. And so after the changes to the catchment boundaries, we maybe begin to see a bit of a settling in those numbers. So there will always be, of course, from year to year, some anomalies and large swings in population. I think Vic West Elementary, for example, had 62 kindergarten students at this point last year, and only had 39 at the time of these numbers being assembled. And again, I think that number is likely to rise, but we will get those swings from time to time. But I think those central columns will give you a sense of that general population. So that's the update on enrollment, particularly focused on elementary to date.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Roberts, for the memo. I wondered whether you could clarify for us when we will receive the middle school and the high school enrollment numbers and projections. Yeah, that'd be great.
I can tell you at this point that the total number of students anticipated for next year is almost identical to the current school year, so we're not expecting any change in total enrollment. The middle school numbers overall are slightly increased. And of course, as you know, for the purposes of the catchment boundary review for high school, we were looking at headcount within a catchment area, but the actual enrollment for secondary will not be established until the end of September, because it's course-based funding and very highly dependent on the number of courses which each individual student registers for, which in our district has been about 108% of the headcount. So I can provide the numbers specifically by school if you'd like those at a later date, but I can summarize that overall we're expecting very little change in the district as a whole.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Nicole? Nope, good, okay. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, seeing none.
Chair, sorry, I did.
Oh, sorry.
Pop my hand up, yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I know it's challenging with me not being on the video.
I'll watch for your hand.
Thank you. My thanks to the Deputy Superintendent for his presentation. I understand that you're not necessarily speaking to middle this evening, but I'm wondering if more generally you can maybe just highlight the Shelburne corridor issue, which has been raised in relation to our current engagements around the Victoria Hospice piece that lands down south. I know that there have been conversations from members of the public around lots of density in that area and concerns about the need for expansion. So I certainly don't expect anything concrete tonight. If you've got numbers coming, but if you could provide a kind of a general summary around where we're looking at in that area, I think that would certainly be helpful to inform us and the public as we head towards that vote next week. Thank you.
One of the decisions that the board made at the time of the catchment boundary review and the reopening of Richmond Elementary as a satellite for Lansdowne Middle School was to greatly increase the capacity of that school to accommodate future growth in middle schools in that neighborhood. So currently Lansdowne is approximately a school of about 700 students, including both North and South campuses. We do expect growth in middle schools to reach its peak, if our projections are correct, in about 2025, 2026, at which time we anticipate that both the South and North campuses combined will be approximately 720 students. The capacity of both schools combined is 875. So even if our projections are nowhere near as accurate as we would like them to be, there's certainly lots of room to accommodate growth for middle school students in that neighborhood. And then along with that, of course, with the opening of Sundance Elementary and some changes to our programs of choice, none of the schools in the downtown core and that the Richmond corridor are projected to reach full capacity. And in fact, based on our current projections, elementary schools are basically at capacity and may even decline in population. I know we're seeing lots of growth in terms of building in the neighborhoods, but the birth rate has declined. And again, even if our projections are off and we do see a significant increase in enrollment, I'm very confident that our elementary schools in that neighborhood will be able to accommodate any growth in population that we're likely to see in the coming decade.
Thank you, Colin. No further questions. I really appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, thank you so much for that, Mr. Roberts. Can we move on to Administrative Regulations Manual and Procedures Manual? District Principal McCartney.
Good evening, everybody. Back again for another information update related to the updated admin regs. And so the memo pretty much speaks for itself, and we have 4 other examples under section 4000 that were attached. Pretty minor updates other than a couple of tweaks here and there. So in addition, though, we've attached an overview grid to help with the list of all of the different admin regs that are coming forward. You'll note in green, we'll use that and update it as we come along when the updated regs have now been published and replaced on the website. So 2 of the package that came forward last month are published and have replaced them. And just the note on school volunteers, because of some of the feedback that was raised and some reflection afterwards, we're going to further edit that to bring it back forward before it goes live and is changed on the website. And then finally, as requested, there is an example attached of a sample of an administrative procedure not directly connected to board policy or regulations. And it's the outline of inclement weather procedures as it relates to, basically a sample of an admin procedure that was requested. So hopefully that provides the information, and always open to comments or questions.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. Any questions for Mr. McCartney? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. McCartney, for bringing forward both the list of the examples of the work that has been done since our last meeting, and also an example of an administrative regulation that doesn't emanate from an existing regulation or board policy. I was struck by, reviewing some of the administrative regulations where there is existing board policy and board regulation by how closely the administrative regulation mirrors the board regulation. Note with some small exceptions down to sort of language, and I think probably changes in the names of departments since 1996. Things have moved on, of course. There's very little difference. Do you anticipate that on the whole, most of the administrative regulations will mirror that closely, existing board regulation?
Yeah, I think again we've looked at trying to bring them forward. So this is a package of some minor updates. So there are some with more substantive changes, including some that might blend or kind of marry a couple of different previous existing administrative regulations. So when those come forward, obviously there will be room for further discussion. But these 4 examples were, for lack of a better word, quick and easy, because they literally are almost carbon copies of the previous. So really the change will be the look and feel and the formatting changes more than anything when they're published as updated on the website.
Nicole?
Yeah, just a brief follow-up. So I'm wondering then, as we get into administrative regulations that are coming forward where there are significant changes, and so they don't mirror the regulation to the same extent, or in theory, the board policy. I'm wondering what the plan is from a process perspective to seek to consult with stakeholders and other folks that have an interest in changes to regulation, especially when we start to deviate from the board policy. And I appreciate if you can't comment right now on how that will look from a process perspective, but just would appreciate if next time around you could come back and just provide us a little bit of context on that.
Sounds like a plan. I'll plan to come back and talk about process and be clear on, how we will navigate that again, and maybe clarify what process has played out to get us here in terms of input and consultation.
Thank you.
When there's substantive change.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Nicole. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we're moving on to Finance and Legal Affairs, 22-23 budget. Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. I would just like to update the committee and the public briefly. The committee meets tomorrow, I think for the 6th time in our budget process. And then we move on to our public meeting on March 10th from 6 to 8 at Uplands. And we're asking that people register with V. Hanley at SD61.bc.ca. And that under the financial page and for the 22-23 budget, there are some meeting materials that people may want to familiarize themselves with as we prepare for March 10th.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions on that? No, seeing none. Moving on to Cedar Hill Middle School Replacement Project, NLC. Who would like to tackle that one?
I'll take that one if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So attached is a memo on page 61 of your packet, written by our architect, and it is basically to explain for the new Cedar Hill Middle School the contemplation of what the Neighborhood Learning Center space will look like. And this is picking up off of our November open meeting and the following survey. And so the NLC at Cedar Hill Middle School will consist of a multi-purpose room and community kitchen, an Indigenous welcome center, and an enhanced gymnasium. And these spaces have been chosen in order to give the school the most flexibility that we can, while also welcoming the community into the school. The multi-purpose room will help with future enrollment if pressures persist or if they occur, as well as welcoming the community in to use the multi-purpose room with the kitchen beside it. Our Indigenous Welcome Center is a very exciting space. We know that lots of schools are trying to create this kind of space in their school. And so it will be wonderful to have it purpose-built as part of the Neighborhood Learning Center. And then the enhanced gymnasium will also be open to the community for rentals and use, as well as enhancing the PE and extracurricular opportunities for students in the school.
Great, thank you so much. Good news coming out of Cedar Hill. Any questions on that? Okay. Awesome. We're going to move forward in the budget. We are going to facilities planning, operations update, March 2022. Mr. Morris, would that be you?
That could be me, Chair.
Okay, carry on.
So the report in front of you is, we had such a close period of time between the last report and this one. Not a lot has changed. The work just continues to flow. And if you scroll through there, you'll see the different things that all the staff are doing out there. It's just scroll right through. Everybody's got their input in there. If there's any questions or comments about that report, please feel free to ask me.
Sure, they're keeping busy. They're keeping busy. Any questions for Mr. Morris? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you, Mr. Morris, for the report, and I appreciate there is a pretty close turnaround between our last meetings, and so that there's you're still busy, but I actually had a question around shops and some of the remediations. I wondered if you could provide us with an update on where we are with the aviation shops, so the shops that are dedicated to some of the new aviation programming at Mount Doug. There were some remediations that were specific to that shop environment. Just wondered if you could update us on how that's going.
I don't have that latest information from Mount Doug. Marnie may.
Yeah, we haven't quite got to the aviation. They did need a new machinery, so that's been bought and installed, and the safety lines are there, but we haven't done a full walkthrough with them yet. We're still working on the wood shops and through the metal shops. So the aviation, I'm hoping we can get to the consultation by the end of June for that and get the work completed in the summertime.
Thank you. Follow up, Nicole?
Yeah, just along the same sort of theme. Thank you very much for that. So last time we talked about this particular item, there was some clarification provided around which parts of the woodshop remediations were tracked and funded by individual schools as sort of part of, I think the term used was part of just regular funding for consumables. And I wanted to just clarify, if I could, which aspects of the areas that needed to be remediated in our wood shops are considered consumables and therefore tracked and funded by individual schools. I wonder if this is something, if I provide the list now, that could be provided. So again, we're going back to things like the eye protection, ear protection, protective clothing, equipment instructions, that kind of thing. Or if it would be better if I offline send the list and just get that clarification via email. So through the chair to
so I'm
appropriate
just
staff
wondering through Kim or Chuck, which would you prefer? Kim?
Yeah, I feel like we've answered this before, but if you want to forward it to me, Nicole, I can make sure we get an answer for you.
Yeah, I appreciate through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer. It has came up last meeting, and I'm afraid I don't have a clear understanding of which of the items are considered consumables and who's tracking what. So I will thank you, Chair Leonard. I will forward an email to get that clarification.
And then
Thanks.
as was just said, I do believe we got the answer last time, but this time we will put it into the record after the answer comes so that we will not go back to the question a third time, hopefully. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Morris?
I have a few questions. Thank you.
Okay, on his report, this is on his specific report to do with building maintenance services.
Oh, you're not on to Vic High yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Mr. Morris? Great. Thanks very much, Chuck, for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're on to Vic High project, seismic project update. Is Mr. Morris taking this again, or Marnie or Kim?
I think that we'll ask Marnie to deliver the report, and then Chuck and I will field any questions.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Quick
Marnie.
report. Yeah, thank you. A quick report. So the trade roughing for the electrical plumbing is underway still. Shoring's being removed from the northwest area. The building permit amendment for the site work has been submitted to the City of Victoria, and it's about a 60 to 90 day turnaround, so we'll be waiting for a bit. The exterior stairwells on the west side are up to the 4th floor, and they're on the 2nd floor on the east side, so that's progressing really well. The interior plaster is underway. The windows and the exterior terracotta are both progressing, and you'll notice the scaffolding on the west side of the building for that. And Lisa McPhail has gone in and videoed the inside of the building, so there should be an update video coming on the website sometime in March, beginning of April.
Great. That's everything from you, Marnie, right now?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions for Chuck or Kim?
Yes.
We'll start with trustees. Any questions from trustees first? Okay, seeing none, Esther.
Thank you. I noticed in the agenda that there's, I guess, a tender process around the proposed volleyball courts. I'm wondering when the community was consulted about volleyball courts.
That was with the amenities package way back when, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe Secretary Treasurer has more information than that.
I don't believe that we did consult on volleyball courts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It wasn't included in the amenities survey. It was added after the fact. So the public has never actually been consulted about the use of Vic High grounds for volleyball courts.
Okay. Did you have another question?
Will you be consulting?
Not that I'm aware of. The principal has determined what programming will be at the school and requested the volleyball courts, and we are supportive of that. And we have a few other schools asking for the same type of amenity in terms of sound volleyball courts. And so as far as I know, it's carrying forward.
Were they consulted?
That's not a question that we can answer here right now.
Right.
That's
But with what authority does the principal get to decide ground use without consultation, please?
the schools go forward with what has been and what they would like to see when they have a building. I mean, very rarely does a school get a brand new build. So these are anomalies, and these are the processes we use at Vic High as well as Oak Bay. So did you have another question with regards to that?
No, my question was, with what authority does the principal have to make a decision such as an amenity for a school without consultation?
The principal worked with staff in facilities and in finance to determine the placement of the facility, the volleyball courts, and working together, that's the decision that was made.
Right, without public consultation.
Did you have another question, Esther?
I have quite a few. In Vic High's project definition report on page 18, it says quite clearly that the former Ferry Tech area was consultants expected that that area would be available when they said that there was room for an NLC. It says it very clearly on page 18. So currently the planned area to the north of Vic High was not the original plan for the daycare. And this site was chosen again without public consultation.
So what's your question?
When will there be public consultation, please? Because a form sent out is for feedback is a one-way process, and SD61's policies say that it's supposed to be a two-way exchange.
Okay.
So the sorry,
Secretary Treasurer.
Sure. And so the PDR is a document that goes from the district to the ministry in pre-planning. The PDR does not involve a consultation process. The NLC was advised to the board, and sorry, can you just ask the last part of your question again?
Well,
when will consultation occur? We've undergone our normal consultation for childcare studios, and we are just awaiting feedback. I believe we've received one piece of feedback so far around the placement of the childcare studios.
Right. Well, actually, I believe that you've received a letter from the Fernwood Community Association, and have you not received letter from the VC PAC?
Not to my knowledge, but I can check.
Not that we've seen so far under correspondence. Did you have another question, Esther?
Well, the question about the consultants believing that there would be room in the former Ferry Tech site for the daycare hasn't been acknowledged.
So we've moved past that. It's not.
You also haven't answered it. It's clearly stated on page 18 of the project definition report that consultants believed that the former Ferry Tech site would be available for the daycare. And how does the board explain why this site was changed without public consultation?
So as I mentioned before, the PDR does not involve public consultation. It's an internal pre-approval document between the district and the ministry. And then once the project's approved, the planning goes forward in terms of where things will be placed.
However, if plans changed about the use of the former Ferry Tech site, why did the plan to continue with the daycare proceed, knowing that space that Vic High students use would be required for the daycare?
So the question's been answered. Do you have another question?
It hasn't been answered.
That's fine.
Why did the plans for the daycare go forward if it was known that space that Vic High students use currently would be required for the daycare?
Do you have another question, Esther?
I would like that answer, please.
We're not going to get an answer to that any beyond what we've already heard. Do you have another question?
Has the board considered changing the site of the daycare?
No, we have not. What's your
Okay.
next question, please?
There is Spring Ridge Commons is now available. And also there's the possibility of rolling over, because it is not district funding, it's Ministry of Children and Family Development money, rolling over the 1.4 million to the Fernwood NRG so that a facility can be constructed on their site that the school district manages. And that way Vic High students are not expected to give up green space for a daycare that was not meant to be located on the north end of the school.
So that's a statement. Do you have another question?
It's not a statement, it's a question. Have you considered that option?
The board has not, to this point in time, considered that option.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
During the public meeting that this community deserves, I recall, in fact, it's in writing that Oak Bay High received several, or numerous, they even said, numerous consultations regarding their neighborhood learning center. And I'm wondering when the Vic High catchment will get a single public meeting, please.
Secretary Treasurer, do we have any more public meetings scheduled in relation to the NLC?
No, we do not.
And when will it be scheduled, please?
We don't have any schedule at this time. Do you have another question?
Well, the question was, when will it be scheduled, or when will there be a discussion about the meeting, please?
And
surely Vic High's catchment deserves one meeting.
Okay, do you have another question?
When will the meeting be, please?
I can't give you an answer right now.
And when will you give an answer, please?
I'm not quite sure. Do you have another question?
I do. Images of the parking. It was said quite clearly on February 14th, I believe, that there are plans to put parking on the north end of Vic High. That information was not included in the one letter that has gone out to notify the public about these plans. I was told at that time that information would be forthcoming at the next meeting. I have yet to see information, and of course the letter went out without it. When will the public have a transparent account of parking plans on the north end of the school, please?
Do you have any information about that, Kim?
I believe an updated site plan with the latest parking plan was attached to either, I believe, the February Vic High report or the January, I forget which. I believe the 14th, February 14th.
Okay. Did you have another question, Esther?
Does it include the laydown area that was mentioned on February 14th?
I don't know that answer at the moment. I'd have to bring that back.
But surely if a letter is going to go out to the single letter that has gone out to the public doesn't include that information, then the public has not been adequately informed prior to being asked for feedback.
The consultation currently underway for the Vic High site is for the placement of childcare studios.
Right, but the comprehensive site requires parking, and it was said that there would be parking specifically for the daycare, and the public deserves to know if there are plans to use the laydown area for parking. And so when will that information be shared with the public, please, for discussion?
So we'll ask that it can be brought back to the next OPPS meeting.
But that was promised on February 14th.
But if it's not changed from what has already been shared, then that would be the information that we would be bringing back. Do you have another question?
I don't see any evidence that that information has been shared, actually. The delineation of the playground in the letter to the public was not clarified in the letter that went out to the public. And in fact, the image that went out to the public is different from the image that was shown in the agenda on February 14th. So it's unclear as to what the plan actually is. And it's not delineated in the image that went out to the public, the area of the playground. When will the public know that, please.
Again, we'll bring that information back.
But should not that information have been included in the one letter that has gone out to the public?
I'm not able to answer that right now. So
I think the answer is yes.
Do you have another question?
The agriculture program, I was also told on February 14th that that there would be, the staff would look into, or the board would look into whether or not an agriculture program had been planned for Vic High.
That's programming. I don't know if we have that kind of information. Secretary Treasurer or Superintendent Whitten? Do either of you know about an agricultural program?
My understanding is the community gardens, as they are being used by the community, I believe, and the school, and that those will be maintained. And I'm not aware of an expanded agricultural program.
So no one looked into it?
I'm not aware
February
of
14th, I was told
program.
that someone would look into it.
Okay, that's what we know at this point in time. Trustee Whitaker, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And sorry, it's just from comments that I've heard that suddenly I do have some questions. And I'm just hearing a little bit of the pricklies in the room. So I'm just kind of, everybody just take a breath. I've spent the day with one of our elders, the lovely Marianne Thomas. So I'm just trying to get into the right groove here. Anyway, so my question comes from the comments around that many of our other high schools are asking also for volleyball courts. And then Secretary Treasurer Morris made the comment that we are putting in sand volleyball courts. So I guess now I'm just looking for some clarification around that. My understanding was that sand volleyball courts, especially in this particular residential area, would not really be a fantastic thing. So just due to the amount of cats and raccoons that tend to like to use these outdoor pits for other uses. So I guess I'm just suddenly concerned, and maybe we can get some feedback or some follow-up as to what is the intention with volleyball courts across the district, and what are we doing to ensure that these are viable and not creating little sand pits and litter boxes for kiddies.
So we've known about sand volleyball courts here for at least a year, just so you know. We were told, yeah, really? We were told a long time ago about them, so it's nothing new. So I don't know if through facilities or anything else, anybody is able to bring any feedback back on them, but I'll leave that with Mr. Morris or whomever, that maybe they can bring back some information on where other people have used them and what's been going on for an upcoming meeting.
Chair, we can do that, yes.
Great.
So my apologies. I knew there was an outdoor volleyball court, but I did not understand the sand piece. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much.
What will you do with the information, please, when you, after March 11th?
Which, are you talking about anything we'd ask for staff to bring back? We'll come back to the next meeting.
No, with the feedback that the public is giving around
it's usually collated and brought back to the board. Secretary Treasurer, would that be your understanding?
Yes.
And then what will happen, please?
The information will be collated and brought back to the board.
And then the board will?
If the board will receive the information. The board doesn't usually give direction unless there's something major within it. So we will receive the information.
And if you receive requests for a public meeting, will that be honored?
I don't know at this time. That would be a board decision of the entire board. So we would consider it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no public disclosures of in-camera items. We're moving on to New business, N1 Budget Climate Action Committee. And before we get into the motion, I'm going to let the interim superintendent Witten speak to it, as it was sort of left with her about the process originally. So we'll see if we have an update from Ms. Witten on the motion in front of us. So Deb?
Thank you, Chair Leonard. We did have a Climate Action Committee meeting last week where we discussed the draft TOR, and we'll likely be discussing as we move forward. It was added to that TOR with regards to the current spending, which would include having that approved prior to coming or prior to any expenditures. So it was added to the bottom with procedural notes.
Okay, thank you very much. So Trustee Whitaker, did you still wish to proceed with this, or does that satisfy you that the TOR would instruct them to come back to the board for permission to spend any of the money?
Just because I haven't seen the TOR, how about we just table it, and as we go forward, it can fall off as that TOR comes back to us.
Table 2. Okay. Won't lose track of it. We will table it till we see the TOR. Okay, thank you very much.
For that. Thank you for that.
With regards to the I'm just going to do a quick recap of the next motion, because we had our big go round the other night about how it's written about a motion that's already been approved. So the motion before us now was referred back here again after a lengthy discussion. And the options we had before us this evening would be to, number 1, defeat the motion on the floor in order to move it forward in a different way, so that it could be rescinded and possibly acted on in the format of another motion being put forward to send to the climate committee. So that was, I hope we don't have to go through all of that again, but because of how motions work and how we would have to deal with this in moving it forward, we would have to defeat this motion in order to rescind it. If we wanted to rescind it in order to create another motion to move forward on that. Trustee Whitaker.
We refer this motion to the Climate Action Committee. Can you just refer it to the Climate Action Committee? They can determine whether or not they want to work on it. And if they want to adopt it, then fantastic. It's part of their terms of reference. If not, I'll bring it back.
In order to do that, we'd have to defeat this, then rescind the original motion, and then move to refer the compost and waste policy proposal to them for consideration. So that would be my course of action tonight. So that we're not simply referring its entirety now, we're actually dealing with it and moving it forward and getting it off the table and not having to refer it. Trustee Ferris.
I'd like to move to defeat the motion.
Well, we would just defeat the motion if that's what we're going to do. It's on the floor now. It's come from committee.
Okay.
But that would be the course of action. If we want to move it to the Climate Action Committee, that's the process to do it: defeat, rescind, and then move it forward. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if that is premature, because we haven't heard from the committee itself about whether or not, it thinks it's tenable for it to deal with the work that the motion calls for, in addition to the work that's already been contemplated for that committee. And I just don't want us to do anything until we hear back from the committee about what they think is possible. And then I think we'll be in a position to do what you're suggesting possibly.
Okay, so my suggestion would be then to defeat this motion. And then it falls back to the original motion, which is still on the books. And then it's much easier to refer the original motion to the Climate Action Committee. Right now we have a 3-step process in order to do anything with this one. So if that's what we want to do and wait until they can see their work, we would have to defeat this. So then we're back to it's like an amendment. We're back to the main motion. And this
Gotcha.
came,
Thanks for the clarification.
and it came from the board, not from the committee. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of order. I'm not quite sure where we are because I know there was a discussion of referring this to the Climate Action Committee. I don't know if that was an actual motion that was made or not. So I just want to know where we are before I speak to this. Are we on the main motion right now?
We're on the motion on the floor. I think it was a suggestion, but it wasn't put on the floor from my understanding.
Thank you. So I won't support this because I think, as the chair has rightly pointed out, the proper process for this would be to defeat this motion, rescind the original motion, and then have a new motion, which could essentially do exactly what this does, but recommend to the Climate Action Committee. And this can all be done relatively simply, and we in fact could do it in one meeting. The challenge that I have with referring, and I know it hasn't been, but my colleagues have raised it, the challenge with referring a motion to establish a committee to another committee of the board is that it is procedurally challenging for another committee to deal with a motion moved by the board to establish a committee. That to me, this seems like poor practice, poor process, and it's why I'm not going to be supporting it. Although I completely support the idea that I know the chair has brought forward around rescinding the original motion and then bringing an entirely new motion to refer a waste compost policy to the Climate Action Committee. I think it's entirely reasonable. So I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers before I call the question? Okay, I'm going to call the question on N2, the Working Committee for Draft and Compost Waste. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? All those opposed? Anne, were you abstaining?
I'm just going to abstain because
Okay.
I'm concerned about losing my motion at this point, but
That's okay. I get you. Okay, all in favor. So Angie, were you in favor as well? Sorry, I missed that.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, abstaining or against?
Against.
Okay, thank you. So one against, one abstaining, and the rest in favor. Okay, so
Point of order, Chair. The rest opposed, I believe.
Oh, everybody was against.
reverse.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I'm hoping that Kelly got that. Okay, so the motion on the floor has been defeated. Did anyone want to rescind the original motion? Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, no, I don't want to rescind it, but
Okay.
I just want to clarify again, just process wise where we are. So I appreciate that really we don't need to necessarily reaffirm because we have a motion that's been passed by the board. But again, going back to Trustee Whitaker's concern, her concern, as I understand it, is that this doesn't get lost. So we in the intervening period between when we passed this motion originally, we established a climate accountability ad hoc committee, or climate action, ad hoc committee. I'm forgetting. I'm going back to my motion from a year ago, and so. And that work that's contemplated by that particular ad hoc committee doesn't include the work that is articulated in this motion. So, it seems though that there is some natural alignments, but before we know that, we need to give the committee a chance to kind of finish establishing its terms of reference and having a discussion. So can we not just table this?
Well, we don't have to, now that we've defeated this motion, we don't have to do anything else. And the motion is still on the books.
Okay. So I just want to give Trustee Whitaker.
Or we could rescind this motion right now and create another motion right now to replace it, to send this to the Climate Action Committee. So it's either, we can do one or the other. Trustee Painter?
Yeah, Chair, I would be willing to move a motion right now if trustees are willing to accept a motion from the floor that we rescind the original motion which was around the working committee and consultation process for compost and waste policy. I don't believe I need to read the whole thing again, but I do think I would move to rescind that motion.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to rescind. So I am anticipating that after, I'll get to you in a second, Trustee Ferris, after the motion to rescind has either gone forward or not, that the next motion could be that we draft a compost, we send a compost and waste policy proposal in alignment with our environmental values and goals to the Climate Action Committee for a draft policy, something along those lines. So that would be how to move it forward and not lose it, but get it off this table now in this unruly format that it's sort of in right now. So we've done step one, we've defeated it. The motion's on the floor to rescind it. Trustee Ferris, you had your hand up.
Second.
Okay, okay. So Ryan and Tom. Speakers to the motion to rescind. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just want to reiterate my earlier comment, which was that I think it's premature to be rescinding anything until we hear back from the committee about whether or not there is scope to do this work in addition to the work that's already been assigned to them. I would rather wait and hear from them before we rescind or do anything else. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers to the motion to rescind the motion? Okay, Trustee Whitaker.
I also don't support that. I think that this is a good motion. It's a good committee and it's a good area for us to be looking at. Today, I watched a number of children look for somewhere to compost their takeout containers, and that wasn't available. So I think our students are ready for this. I think that they're ready to teach their parents and their community how to deal with waste better than we are doing. And I think we just need to provide them with those resources and have a bit of conversation. So I'm not willing, I'm disappointed to see this being rescinded because I think it's important to be done sooner than later. And I don't think that the Climate Action Committee is going to have the time to be able to focus on this. So.
Okay. Trustee Hensa.
Thanks. I'm on the Climate Action Committee, and I know that we're meeting next week. God, this month is already disappearing.
The 17th.
And that's on our to-do list, is look more carefully at all the motions that we have currently outstanding that have to do with climate, and this is one of them. So would it be appropriate to just, instead of to table this motion on rescinding until after we've met and we can have a discussion without having specific direction, just because it's something that everybody on the Climate Action Committee is interested in doing, and it can be part of our discussion, what we can see this looking like, and then we can bring that information back from the Climate Action Committee to OPPS in April, and that information might inform how we want to vote and move forward on the compost specifically.
Chair, point of order.
Trustee Whitaker.
Trustee Painter.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, for process, I appreciate what Trustee Hensa is saying. I would recommend we not table a motion to rescind. I do not find that comfortable because it means that we have a motion out there to possibly remove something and possibly not, just sitting on the books. I'd much rather this motion be defeated if trustees prefer to defeat, and just allow it to sit, to allow the Climate Action Committee to discuss and come back to us. So if that means defeating this motion, fine. I'm also happy to withdraw it, but it has been seconded, so I'm good with defeating it too.
Yeah, part of the issue with the motion in front of us is it's creating two committees. We have the Climate Action Committee, and then we have a working committee. So in rescinding the motion, you would go back to having one committee in order to deal with all of the items to do with climate. And I think that would be better for the district, easier for us to move forward, and certainly better for staff to have it all in one area of focus. So I am still in favor of personally of rescinding this motion in order to not have two committees. And I don't want to lose the policy of the compost and waste policy piece. So I'm still going to vote to rescind this, and then if somebody wants to refer something else to the committee work, or bring up a motion at the next ops meeting or something to refer that policy to the Action Climate Committee, I'd be happy to go with that route. But I'm going to vote to rescind right now because it's very confusing having two committees on the books right now. Any other speakers to this motion? And the motion right now is to rescind. Okay, so we'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to rescind? So we have 1, 2. Is that hand up to speak, Ryan, or to vote yes?
No, hand up to vote, Chair. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And Jordan, your screen's gone dark. Are you in this or? Oh, no. Okay, all those opposed to voting? Okay, 3, and the motion is defeated. So the motion is still on the books. So the motion to rescind has been defeated. So motion still on the books. And did anyone want to refer it to the next ops meeting then?
Chair, I'll move to refer this to the next ops committee.
Okay.
What are we referring?
The original motion.
Which was what?
The motion you put forward in June 2019. We're back to the original, or 2021. We're back to the original motion. It's being referred to the ops committee pending the climate action committee meeting and discussing whether or not they think that they can do this work there. And then they'll bring back some more information. Yes.
It's already on our agenda for
right.
Next. So does it need to be referred if it's already there?
Well, we have to deal with this motion. We have to do something with it. So we're referring it to the next ops meeting so that we can have the discussion after you tell us what your discussion
Point of order, Chair. Everything was voted on, so there is no need to refer anything or whatever. All motions were voted and completed, which has left it on the books. Choosing to refer it is actually,
you're right.
You would need to have to create some motion. So
right.
I appreciate that the committee is going to do that, and I would assume that it will come out of their report.
Excellent. So this just drops off the agenda now because it's just back to the original motion in June. Thanks, Anne. Appreciate that. Okay, we're moving on to M3. Trustee Whitaker.
And 3, what are we talking about now? Oh, so this again was brought from the board meeting to the committee to discuss further. And this is about petitioning the Minister of Education for an order under Section 30 of the School Act to reduce the number of trustees on the Greater Victoria School Board from 9 to 7. So I'm hoping we can have some further conversation about that. My reasons for wanting to do this are, one is the budget savings, which is 50,000 plus annually ongoing, which is kind of nice. As well, I think it's really important, especially now I look around at the world, I think that democracy and defending it is really, really important. And we have good democracy when we have a strong election and there is competition, and as clearly going as we have been going over the last few years, there isn't a strong competition to become a trustee. It's known that trustees step away before new trustees are elected to the role. Currently on this board, there are only 3 in the last 2 elections who were not in spots 8 and 9. So many of the people sitting now at the table would not be here with the 7. I just think it allows for a better campaign and more choice, and as well it creates candidates who are far more committed to the role, and I think more informed. So anyway, I think that a discussion would be fantastic about this. The reasons for not supporting this that have been previously mentioned are about the amount of work that the board has to do, and that there are so many committees. I'll have you know, I don't have any committees working really hard. I know that since Trustee Painter and Trustee McNally have left, we have not had to replace any trustees to any committees that they were on other than the BCPC. So this board has been able to operate quite successfully with 7 active trustees, or with the trustees that they have. I have been using so was that we should consult with our partner groups, and if anything, I would like us to consider maybe not this motion, but a motion to petition our rights holders and stakeholders on what their thoughts are on this. So maybe some conversation around that.
Okay, Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. I have belatedly, but I have sent trustees an email because I asked this question to BC School Trustees Association President Stephanie Higginson around trustee variation guidelines, because I was relatively certain that there were guidelines, and I have discovered them. Relevant legislation is the School Act, Section 30, Sub 4 and Sub 5, and it does lay out procedures for varying trustees. I'll note that trustee variation requests must be submitted to the minister by December 31st of the year before a general school election in order for any changes to be in place in time for that election. And there is also a consultation process that is required under the legislation. So I certainly don't support the motion because it does seem to go against the legislation. I may even recommend that the motion itself is out of order because we're not able to act on it because we are in the election year, which as anybody who sees my email, although again, I do apologize for its belatedness, it is not the right time to do this. We would have to get past the next election in order to activate the trustee variance procedures. So Chair, I put it over to you. I do believe the motion is out of order due to the School Act federal regulations. So I put that to you.
So it is out of order in the effect that it would take effect in the upcoming election. So that, I guess that would rule the whole motion out of order. So we will rule it out of order. Do I have to vote on that?
No, you don't, Chair. You have the capacity to rule out of order. There may be a challenge to that, but we can get to that if it comes to it.
Does anyone challenge that ruling? Okay, seeing none, that motion is out of order. Thanks for the information, Ryan. That helps greatly. N4, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things to highlight from the memo that I've already provided trustees and folks around the table. So the motion that I'm hoping the board will consider tonight is that the Board of Education of Greater Victoria, SD61, requests that before considering third reading of the bylaw and concluding a purchase and sale agreement with VHS, that's the Victoria Hospice Society, the superintendent provide the boards for the board's review, a report outlining the impacts, including any future costs and risks associated with the custody, maintenance, and safekeeping of the residual SD61 lands, and how the VHS proposal achieves the objectives of the Boca Creek Blueprint and Daylighting Feasibility Study. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things in particular from the memo that I provided. Firstly, I wanted to note that the 2011 Boca Creek Blueprint and the 2020 Daylighting Feasibility Study prescribe recommendations and solutions for the 1.9 acre property, including those pertaining to creek restoration as well as stormwater detention to mitigate flooding on site and also downstream. The latest Victoria Hospice Society proposal cites a flood plain storage volume of 4.9 million liters, and this actually represents less than 15% of the 36,000 cubic meters of storage capacity cited in the 2020 Daylighting Feasibility Study. And I understand that this is unlikely to contribute significantly to flood mitigation downstream as a result of that reduction from what was envisioned. The latest VHS proposal includes some big commitments to involving areas outside of the newly proposed lot boundaries. So they've offered sort of at this point, no specifics such as timelines, costs, or who will be paying for any commitments or improvements. The subject property included in the latest proposal is also, I note, 1.28 acres. That's a 32% reduction in the previously proposed 1.9 acres. I note, and I'd like the committee to take note of the proposed property line, which has been relocated from the center line of the creek to the west of the creek, so that the entire section of the creek would remain within the parent SD61 parcel. And finally, the location of the proposed property line and how the VHS's proposed plans are implemented may significantly impact future costs that are associated with the custody control, the custody maintenance and safekeeping, and our ability to utilize for educational purposes and community use the residual parent property that would remain within SD61 ownership. And I would like us to note when we're considering the motion that we have to date not received information regarding the potential combined impacts of both the proposed CSF school developments on the land that was sold on the Lansdowne North property and the current VHS proposal at Lansdowne South, including any buildings and impervious services and those potential impacts such as increased flooding and the risks and costs associated with that, including our ability to utilize for educational purposes and community use the residual parent property that would or will remain in SD61 ownership. So I'm hoping that we have a bit of grace here that we were not anticipating we would have, frankly, because one of the potential partners has requested an extension till the 14th of March. And so there's a window here for us to consider some of these impacts and some of these long-term risks, and to really consider what is quite a significantly revised plan, I think, that came forward on the 18th in some greater depth and with some more consideration. So I hope that my colleagues see the wisdom in undertaking this further work, and that we can discuss how that might be achieved between now and the 14th.
Ryan?
Thanks. I appreciate that we have a motion on the floor. I'm not quite into the debate at this point. I just have a question through you, Chair, to Trustee Duncan. If Trustee Duncan can help me understand the process or the order of operations, I suppose, for this, because we would be essentially this motion, because we can't act on this motion until the board passes it. That happens on the 14th, at the same evening that, from what I understand, the board will be considering third reading of the disposal bylaw. So my question through you to Trustee Duncan is how do you see that effectively working if we're essentially looking to vote on something that would not be able to be acted because we'd be moving or we'd be voting on the motion and potentially whatever happened. I mean, if the motion were defeated, ostensibly the plan falls apart. If the motion were approved for third reading, then my understanding of this motion and the intention would essentially be moot. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the process and how Trustee Duncan feels this is going to work, because I'm a little bit lost.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, happy to. So if colleagues agree that we need to do more due diligence here and ask ourselves about some of the impacts of this revised plan, then my suggestion would be, if it passes here, and then it obviously would need to be considered at the board before any third bylaw reading could be considered. If it's supported by the board, then what would happen, at least I would envision would happen, would be that the third reading would be either be tabled or referred to a later date. But the impact from a procedural perspective would be that the third reading would not go ahead on the 14th, because we would have some work that we needed to do.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. And if I may, Chair,
Yes.
a question through you to staff, and maybe staff aren't in a position to answer this right now, but I'm wondering if staff have any thoughts around the questions that Trustee Duncan has proposed here through this motion. If there's, I mean, we have been going through this process now with VHS and the consultations and our questions and all of these pieces for a while now. Do you have these questions in hand around the custody, maintenance, and safekeeping of residual SD61 lands? I'm just curious if you have any thoughts. Anything from hospice obviously will have to come from them, but do we have anything to help provide some of the clarity I think Trustee Duncan is looking for?
Secretary Treasurer?
I think the only experience we have with Friends of Boker Creek and the daylight portion of the creek and an outdoor classroom is at Oak Bay. It's my understanding that this is of no maintenance or upkeep by us, as Friends of Boker Creek are stewards of the creek, but I have sent that question to staff.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor of the motion?
Actually, you do have a hand up.
Yeah.
Sergeant?
You do
Oh,
have a
Isabel?
Yes, hello, thank you for letting me speak. I have several questions, though I will start with a comment to the earlier part of the presentation regarding enrollments, which was a projection for the next 10 years. And I'd like to point out that you had put Richmond Elementary School up for sale in 2007, which is 15 years ago. And as you noted, you absolutely need now what is Lansdowne Middle School South Campus currently to deal with the capacity issues in the neighborhood, because we know that the North Campus is full. So the projections made back in 2007 that you did not need the property were wrong, and it was the community that helped you overturn that decision. Projecting 10 years out now is actually a very limited time frame and very short-term thinking, and I would say that those are not adequate numbers to be basing it on, as development will only be beginning on certain properties. It takes years to develop, families will move in, children will be born. That does not necessarily account for what the population will look like. So I'd like you to reconsider those thoughts, please.
So we do have a motion on the floor. Would you like to speak to the motion on the floor?
I would indeed, but I needed a chance to comment because I do know from my last experience here, I was only given one opportunity to speak. And if I spoke earlier, I would not get the opportunity to speak now. So with regards to Trustee Duncan's motion, which I really appreciate because it reflects the stewardship role that SD61 has also of the creek, and you are parties to the Boker Creek Initiative and the agreements that were made with regard to the daylighting feasibility study, and you are now proposing to sell this property to a partner. So one question I have for you is, we understand that the purchase and sales agreement is subject to 3 readings of the board and minister's approval. Is the sale also conditional on the successful rezoning? That's the first question, and there's a question that follows that. Is the sale conditional on successful rezoning?
Secretary Treasurer Morris, are you able to answer that question at this time?
The sale is subject to a successful subdivision plan.
And what happens if that is not successful, if they fail to get that rezoned?
It's not rezoning, it's a subdivision plan.
Okay.
And if the subdivision plan fails, then the purchase and sale agreement does not move forward.
Okay, so then the property would revert back to the district, and the purchaser would not be in possession of the land and be able to flip the property to sell it?
Right.
Okay, now what happens if there is a successful division of property and the purchaser begins to move forward on plans and then makes a decision to perhaps decide this maybe isn't what we want to do, and then would decide to sell the property? What would happen then?
If the subdivision plan is successful, then title will change and the deal is complete, and the school district has no further claim on the land.
So that would mean that if in the future the purchaser decides to sell the land, that they could freely sell that property, and you would have a neighbor that you have no control over in terms of who that would be, how they would develop the site, and what the impact would be on that school property. That sounds like quite a risk, because we also know that the purchaser is building on a floodplain. We know that the plans have been changed 3 times since the initial agreement. You have not gone back to an initial bylaw reading. You keep moving forward with bylaw readings. When the plan has changed 3 times, then I don't know how you can possibly do due diligence when the purchaser keeps changing their plans. So
Do you have a
there is
question
a
for
risk.
us?
My question is this: what is your ability to put into the purchase agreement a contingency plan that if the purchaser does not choose to build on the property, but would instead choose to sell, that it reverts back to the school district? What protections are in place so you actually have control of who would be neighboring a school?
That has not been negotiated and would need to be negotiated.
So I would ask you to consider that as part of a negotiation, because it strikes me as very important to know who the neighbor to a school would be. Do you have, I'm going to ask all of you, do you have any concerns about the potential neighbor to a school?
So you've asked the question. We've all heard the question. We're not obliged to individually give you answers right now. So did you have any follow-up questions?
So my understanding is this question would be considered.
We have all heard the question, so it will all be in our deliberations when we get to the final reading or the next meeting. Did you have any other questions you wish to ask tonight?
Well, then it goes back to the fact that you are in fact reading on a 3rd bylaw reading when the proposal has changed. So the VHS proposal has changed significantly since 1st and 2nd reading. Notably, the area is 30% less and no longer encompasses any of the creek channel. That is all of the creek. Related risks seem to be back on SD61. Is it appropriate for the board to be going to 3rd reading when the 1st and 2nd reading were on quite a different proposal?
So it's not a question we can answer here. We appreciate that you're giving us your opinion and you're giving us some information, but we're not going to be answering that question here. We're not debating you is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, understood. And I understood from my last meeting also that you had said my questions wouldn't be answered. Chair Painter had said he would try to get answers to me. And at the February 28th meeting, I know my questions were, the initial questions I submitted were brought forward to be answered along with Trustee Whitaker's questions. And I don't know if I've seen where that is. So if you can point me to where I might find the answers to those questions, that would be wonderful.
Did we place it for the record, Secretary Treasurer?
The requester's correspondence was on the February 28th board meeting, and the answers as could be answered by staff are included in that correspondence. So if you look at your item on the February 28th correspondence, you should see some of the answers there. Some of them were more directed to individual trustees for them to deliberate in their debate for 3rd reading. And so where there was a technical question and staff could answer, we did.
Okay. So
you're going to actually have to tell me where I would find that then. I go back onto the website under the correspondence for February 28th.
Yes, and that'll be your letter is included in the correspondence. And if you click on that, you'll get the whole package.
Under meetings of the board, you're looking for the agenda for the meeting.
Right. I'll be taking a look.
In the agenda, it'll be under the section correspondence.
Okay, I've got Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Whitaker.
I actually think Trustee Whitaker was first, but
sorry, Anne.
So 2 things, but first, just a point of clarification. At our last board meeting, it was decided that there would be the Q&A of both Trustee Duncan and myself, and I believe Isabel's Q&A also was going to be posted on the website, available for everybody to see. So it sounds like that hasn't happened.
It's under correspondence.
So Isabel's questions are under correspondence. The FAQ is in progress. I had intended to have that out by the end of the week, but it's been a very busy time. And so I hope to have that completed tomorrow or the next day.
Okay.
May I make one more question, one more comment? And I appreciate the time you've given me, but it is this question. At February 28th meeting, you gave the partner in this, the purchaser, a 2 weeks allowance to postpone due to their timeline issues. I would suggest you are running into timeline issues to properly assess what the sale implications are. Why can you not now postpone for your needs, for due diligence that needs to still happen, given all the questions on the table? Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan?
Can I just, okay, go ahead.
Nicole?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just thought it might be helpful. I had a similar observation to Trustee Whitaker, but the Secretary Treasurer has kindly answered that. But I wonder if it might be helpful if, through the Chair to the Secretary Treasurer, we could point folks to where on the website they can expect to find the FAQ when it is ready to go.
Secretary Treasurer? On the menu bar.
Sure, I would probably have to check with the communications manager. I don't know off the top of my head.
Would it be in a similar place to where the VCI is?
Well, there's already an FAQ posted, so I'm just quickly searching for that. Sorry. We did one back in November or December, so I'm just adding to that one and reposting it. So I have the Word document, but I don't know where it was on the website. Sorry. I'll have a quick look. If I have an answer by the end of the meeting, I'll try to
I think
get
it's
it.
under board. There's a place under the, when you click on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions before we call the vote? Trustee Whitaker.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to speak in favor of the motion. I too, despite the great amount of effort that staff has been putting into answering the many questions that are there, I still don't have a clear understanding of who is going to be financially responsible for the fabulous new drawing. I know that there is comment saying that that the VHS is going to pay for that, but I haven't actually seen that in writing anywhere. I just still have several concerns, because it just seems to be that at every meeting it's, well, there's the question, we'll get back to you at the meeting that you're going to do the vote. And I just need to express and say, you know, I need time to process and to think about things. Life is busy. I wear many different hats, and I would appreciate if I'm provided information with enough time to process it. And that's not from 7 o'clock in the meeting till 9:30 at night in the meeting, because I just am not able to focus on it clearly during that time. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, we're going, Trustee Waters.
I just want to say that I've been really impressed by the speed at which we're getting responses to questions. Trustee Whitaker, you sent in a bunch of really great questions, and we did get answers to them very quickly, and I'm sure they're going to appear in the FAQ as well. So I'm not supporting this motion right now, because for me, the information is coming in a timely way. So I'm going to wait and see what comes and what questions I have left once we get to the vote. And if at that time I feel like I don't have the information, then I'm absolutely ready to postpone or defeat, so that we can make sure that we have the information. But for me, like, we're still in this process, so I'm not feeling like I need to direct staff to provide more information when I know that they're working really hard to put it all together.
Trustee Duncan, to close.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll keep it brief. I think we're all either, well, should be aware of what's at stake here. But, you know, I think that, you know, what we're proposing is to go ahead with a third bylaw reading next Monday. And, you know, I don't think it's about how fast staff have provided the information. You know, this is not a critique of the efforts that our staff have put in here. This is really, you know, an attempt to say, look, this is a complex issue. There are a lot of players here. There's a lot at stake for our students and our community. It's become more complex as things have evolved, partly because as a board, we kind of late in the game, you know, appreciated the fact that we were a partner to this framework, and that this is a floodplain. And, we've had multiple permutations of a proposal from our potential purchaser. And the latest one, in my view, presents some significant questions about the long-term risks, costs, and impacts. And, because of the complexities here, I think it really is incumbent on us as a board to not rush these things, to really ensure that we are clear with our staff what we need in order to get to a point where we can properly exercise our judgment around this, and with full knowledge of what the impacts are. I mean, I really would hate to think that we are in a position where we haven't fully considered what the costs, the risks, and the impacts are. And then we find, 5 or 10 years from now that actually our students aren't able to fully utilize the remaining property because it's flooding. There's just some really kind of fundamental things here that, I don't have the expertise to know. I need to be guided by experts. We are very fortunate that we have a lot of expertise within our partnership, and folks who have fed into, just in 2020, a daylight feasibility study, which, contains some technical a lot of technical know-how that's been compiled, and that would really assist us, I think, to answer some of these questions. So this is not, I'm not bringing this forward as a comment on what our staff have or haven't done. This is an incredibly complex issue. All I'm suggesting is that we not rush. We appreciate that we have some further complexity here because we've received yet another proposal, and we take the time to really do our due diligence and to answer these tough questions in advance of a third reading. And I think it's very fair that our community is pointing out to us that the agreement or the proposal has significantly changed in the course of us, undertaking our first and second reading and about to carry out our third reading. So anyway, I won't say more. I think I've said it all, or I've said what I could tonight, but I hope that my colleagues will consider the motion seriously. Thank you.
Chair.
Yes, who's Trustee Painter?
Yeah, just a point of personal privilege.
Yeah.
I appreciate that there are trustees who come to this with very different perspectives. I continue to be challenged around the language that some trustees don't understand, are not properly considering, are not doing their due diligence. That language is very troubling because it assumes that other colleagues around the table are not doing their job. And I would really like trustees to stop using that language to infer that other trustees are not working. We are all doing the best that we can with the capacity that we can, with the information that we have. And I would really, really like to see my colleagues around the table stop using that language to refer to other trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Secretary Treasurer had an update for us.
Yes, so the FAQ that currently exists is on the district website under news and events. Current initiatives, and then if you scroll down the page to the Lansdowne South link, that will open the Lansdowne South page, and at the bottom of that are some documents that are available to the public, and the updated FAQ will be posted there.
Awesome, thank you very much. Well, thank you. We're going to call the question, Trustee Duncan. You spoke at length. You spoke at length, and
I'm not trying to close here. I think that if a colleague's going to use a point of privilege in order to express a personal view that has a direct relationship to what I've just said in closing, then I think it's only fair that I have the opportunity to reply to the invitation.
No, I don't believe so. I think his remarks were in order because of some of the things you said. I didn't call you on it, but I agree with him raising the point of privilege from his perspective. So we're going to move.
Well, shall I raise a point of privilege from my perspective then, Chair, and just say that what I'm expressing my view, and my view is that for me to exercise my judgment on this complex issue, I think we need more information. My colleagues are entitled to disagree with me, but what my colleagues aren't entitled to do is to imply that somehow I'm trying to besmirch their good character or I'm trying to explain my position and on this particular matter, which I do think is complex. And I'm trying to implore my colleagues to see my perspective, but I fully appreciate that if you don't, you won't vote in favor of it. So I wanted to say that because I don't want us as a board to leave these kinds of things hanging out in the air. If there's a disagreement or a lack of clarity about what's implied when I close, when I'm presenting a motion to the board, then I'm happy to address that. I don't want anyone to leave this table tonight feeling like their character is being besmirched, but also I don't want to leave the table tonight feeling like my character is being besmirched. I brought this motion forward in good faith because I care about us doing a good job here, and I know it's a highly difficult decision, and there's a lot of partners and there's a lot at stake. So I appreciate you giving me a moment to address it, and I hope that makes clear what my intentions were in bringing the motion forward tonight.
Okay, thank you. We're going to call the question on the motion. Motion was on N4 at the bottom of the agenda this evening. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. All those opposed to the motion? And the motion fails. With Trustee Duncan, Whitaker, and Hensa voting against. For, sorry, and the balance voting against. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Ryan Painter, all those in favor? Thank you very much and have a good evening.